Today we're going to learn how to make some handmade postcards. These are holiday themed postcards that are made from magazine pages that have been cut in strips or torn in strips like this one. And the ornaments are also made from faces that have been cut from magazines, which is why all the ornaments have eyes. Let's start with postcard substrates. You can make postcards out of anything. This is a box from Gray's. I get Gray's boxes every 3 weeks. And they come in these lightweight chipboard boxes that have printed interiors. And that would make a great postcard base. I could just cut it to the right size and use that as my base. But I am basically lazy, so rather than doing postcards from cardstock or chipboard that I have to cut, I buy bases pre-cut. So this is watercolor paper and it's cut 4x6. This is 12 sheets for $1.99, which is kind of a steal. I bought this at Hobby Lobby. And these are postcard sized, and I can just use one of these and dive in, and then when I'm finished with the artwork, flip it over, draw the postcard back, stick a stamp on it, and it's done. The other thing I like to use is these blank index cards. And these are, like lightweight Bristol stock, heavier than heavy printer paper, but not as heavy as cardstock. Not as heavy as I would like if I was going to send it through the mail. It's kind of lightweight. So I generally use 3 for a postcard. And 100 of these, actually I saw 100 of these with lines on them at the dollar store for $1. So these are no line. I got them at Staples. They're a little more expensive, but there's no reason you can't use the ones with lines. You know, just put the lines to the back, and then when you're ready to put your back on, put the lines inside the sandwich, and you'll have a nice clean postcard. But I usually start by just gluing 2 together to give myself a nice stable surface to work on. And more often than not, I will use these index cards for postcards that are the artwork is going to be magazine collage rather than paint. If I'm going to use paint, I usually use something that's meant to absorb paint, like this watercolor paper. So just glue it together, and if I'm being a real fanatic, I'll grab a brayer and brayer it just to keep it nice and flat. And generally I'll glue half a dozen together so that they're ready when I'm ready to make postcards. And that way I don't have to wait for glue to dry. I went through some old Vanity Fair magazines that I'm about to throw out, and just pulled out some pages that are sort of in the same color palette. This one is sort of a gold palette, and this one is sort of based on this Starry Night background. It's all in blues and yellows. And I'm going to cut strips from these to create the strip backgrounds. And I want to cut strips that are long enough to go crosswise on this postcard, because I have an idea for what I'm going to put on it, and it wants to go long ways. So I'm going to do stripes crosswise. I only really need a strip that's just slightly longer than this 4-inch card is. So I'm going to cut strips from these, and I'm going to choose areas that are maybe visually interesting, maybe have some words in them. And I can cut across, or I can cut up and down. Like here, I could cut a strip No, not quite wide enough. But this one is wide enough that I could cut this way instead of this way. So I'm just going to cut some strips from these and avoid the areas that I don't like. Like, I really don't want something that says Midnight in Paris, but this section right up here, up above it, looks interesting, and this section right here looks interesting. So maybe I can get a few strips out of that. Here's my card that has had strips glued to it, and I've just glued them and folded them over to the back, just like I'm doing this one. I'm trying to get this one all the way to the edge so I don't have any white space showing. There. And a little trim. And fold the tabs over. And there's my background, made from sort of color coordinated strips. And just to keep everything nice and flat, just run over it with my brayer. And now that's ready for a design. Or I could choose to do maybe a little paint on it, a little gesso or a little glaze to tone everything down. But I think I'm probably going to work straight over this. Here are my postcard backgrounds. I did these 3 on the bottom with strips that were just cut straight. And I did these 2 with strips that were cut straight on the bottom and then torn on the top. And these are sort of in the same color palette. You can see how it just gives a different effect. So now that I have backgrounds, I'm going to work on some focal images. And I've decided to do some Christmas ornaments that have eyeballs in the center. So I tore out some magazine images, and I used this stencil as a sort of window to show me how much of the face would show through. This is kind of the circle that I want to use. I'm also going to do some with this smaller one right here. So I just sort of went through my magazines and chose some faces that I thought were kind of the right size. And I'm actually going to use this stencil as my template for ornaments. So I'm just going to draw a circle around the parts of the face that I want to use and then cut them out. And you probably don't need to watch me do that. Now I have 2 circles on each of these backgrounds that are sort of loosely positioned, and I opted to do all of mine as faces, or this one right here is just an eye because I'm making slightly creepy postcards. But you could just as easily cut out circles of textures or patterns, or a dog or whatever, just as long as you have circles. And now all I'm going to do is glue these circles down. The next thing I'm going to do is turn these circles into sort of spheres, and also obliterate all of the face except for the eyes. And I've already done one to sort of show you what that looks like. And here's what I'm doing. I'm taking my stencil, and if you don't have a stencil, you can cut one from a piece of manila folder and using a circle punch, or you can freehand this if you feel confident. And I'm just taking a little gesso in my fingertip and applying the gesso all around the bottom part of the circle to cover up the lips and the nose. And I'm bringing it up around the side to cover up hair and ears. And I'm doing this with my finger because it allows me to kind of feather the gesso application so that it's heavy on the outside, but not so heavy where I don't want it to be, like around the eyes. So, and if it gets up too close to the eye, you can just use a clean finger to wipe it away. So this works better for me than trying to use a brush or a sponge. And you just want to get a good circle going. And cover up any portion of the design that you don't want to show in the finished ornament. So I'm just going for eyes. There you go. And it's already starting to look a little less like a circle cut from a magazine and more like a Christmas ornament. So I'm going to go through and do all the big ones, and then when those are dry, I'll do the small ones because I don't want to drag my stencil through wet gesso. Now that I've applied gesso to both the large and the small circles, I'm coming back in and just touching up a little bit if lips show through or it's too dark along the edge or whatever. I'm just going to apply a little extra. And I'm not using my circle mask, my circle stencil for this because I'm not really getting too close to the outside. And really at this point I can almost feel the edge, so if I needed to go that far I would. So now I'm adding color to my Christmas ornaments, and I'm doing all of this with really cheap acrylic craft paints, which are almost glazes when they come out of the bottle. There's so little pigment in them, and I like to exploit that by using them as glazes. So I'm starting with a little bit of kind of the bright tone that I'm using, bright yellow, and I'm alternating between just straight paint and paint with a little bit of matte medium in it to turn it even more transparent, so that I get just a minimal amount of paint over the areas where the eyes are, but I'm still toning them yellow to match the rest of the ornament. And then as I get further out, I go back to straight yellow paint. Because the background is made from magazine strips and is glossy, it's really easy to wipe any excess away. So that's why I'm not using my circle stencil as a template anymore. I can feel the edges where the gesso ends. Now I'm doing a little bit of dark down here in this corner and blending it in. And a tiny bit of light up here, a little bit of gesso. And I might also add in a little bit of shading with either charcoal or pastel to make this dark even darker. I'm just doing a little bit of light up here. And while I'm here, I'm also going to take a bamboo skewer and do highlights in the eyes to make them pop. And I'm just mirroring the highlights that were already there, just like that. Now I'll just set this aside and dry. Oh, I was going to mention wrinkles. Magazine pages tend to wrinkle when you apply gesso or paint to them, and you can see that this one is wrinkling. I'm not really worried about it. They do tend to lay back down after they're dry, and if they don't, I call it texture and learn to love it. I don't really stress about that at all. You know, it is what it is. So I thought I'd show this same technique in blue so you could see a little clearer how the paint goes on. So I'm using just plain blue paint with a little bit of matte medium blended in. This bottle is a little bit old, so I added a little extra medium to help the paint glide. And if I get a little bit on the background, I can just wipe it away. So I'm just trying to tone the whole ornament blue. And getting the blue over the eyes. And if you get too much on, just use your little finger to wipe it away a little bit. Clear away those eyes. But you still want the rest of the ornament to look fairly blue. And then just the tiniest bit of a darker blue over here where it's shadowed. And I'm just sort of arbitrarily picking lower right side for shadowing. And then diagonally across from it, upper left side, highlight. And highlights on the eyes where they were before. Putting them in with gesso really makes them pop. Just like that. Now I'll set it aside to dry. One more little embellishment before I start in with pen work, and that is a little glitter glue, because what is a Christmas ornament without a little glitter? So the key to this is to add a little glitter on and then blend it around with your finger, and you want to put it in where the midtones are and maybe just a tiny bit where the highlight is, but you really want that highlight to stay as white as possible, and you want to keep the glitter out of the shadow area because in theory there's no light hitting it, so it wouldn't glitter. Here. So now, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but It's a little glittery. I should probably say while I'm doing this glitter glue part, please use glitter glue and not glue and loose glitter. Loose glitter tends to shed all over the place, and it really makes the post office cranky. Like, if anything will make them send your postcard back to you or ding you for extra postage, it is loose glitter that sheds all over their nice machines. Now I'm going to draw in with a metallic Sharpie the little caps that go on top of ornaments. Just a little square. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, and you don't have to stress over it. Just draw a rectangle. And then, lining up with the edge of the postcard, I'm going to draw a straight line. As if this is a piece of ribbon or a piece of something that's holding the ornament to something else that's off the edge of this postcard. And if you want to, you can put a little loop right here. So the last thing I'm going to do is what I've already done on this one, and that is to outline the circle in black, just to help it pop a little bit and to give it, I don't know, more of a hand-drawn feel. A lot of times outlining stuff really does shift it from magazine collage to something that is drawn by hand. So I'm just outlining around where the gesso was applied. It creates a little ridge that makes it really easy to follow. And then I'm going to add in some lines on the ornament cap. And I'm going to outline on either side of this string just to help it pop a little bit. And it really does sort of make it look, I don't know, finished, I guess. Makes it look finished. I'm not worried too much if my line gets wiggly or if it's thicker in some places than others. And the marker that I'm using is a Copic multi-liner. It's not the Copics that everybody is all gaga over. These are the multi-liners that are designed for calligraphy. And this one is a 0.7 tip size. Just nice for outlining. There. All postcards need backs on them. And there are a few things that you need to know about postcard backs. The first one is that the bottom 3/4 of an inch of any postcard needs to be left blank. And that's because the post office puts that little long barcode strip on the bottom. So they get cranky if you put stuff there. Actually, they don't get cranky, they just cover it over. Then your address is supposed to go in the 2 1/4 inches from the right side edge. And then the last thing to know is that 1 1/8 inches from this corner is where your stamp is supposed to go. So if you sort of draw something like that, you have a postcard back for your handmade postcards. So 3/4, 2 1/4, 1 1/8. That's all you need to know. Once I have all that information on my card, all I have to do is pop it on the back of my finished postcard with some glue stick, and it's ready to mail.